one. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. As you know, we talk a lot about blind spots. We talk a lot about that, and I'm working on my next book about business blind spots. And I'm like, I found somebody that knows $1 billion blind spot. I'm like, come on, that's kind of bold. And then I find out, my gosh, there's a book called $1 billion Blind Spot. So I'm like, man, I got to get this lady on my show. Well, the challenge is I have like a 50-50 chance of saying her name right. So if I mess it up, she'll correct me, but I've been practicing all day. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Hacia Atherton. How are you?
Good, thank you, and well done on my name.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You're a
You
principal
can relax
consultant.
now.
I know this, the hard part's done. Holy cow. So you are the principal consultant at All Star Consulting Services. So there's so much to unpack. I want to start simple and just kind of fill us in on what is All Star Consulting Services.
So we really work with the trade-based companies, whether that's in manufacturing or construction, oil and gas, really looking to level up and particularly start looking at getting private equity investment. So we come in and really look at their people, process, and profit pillars, making sure that they're actually structured and their P&Ls are structured in the right way. So they're not losing money when they go to the private equity firms, making sure their processes are really rock solid. Do we need to bring some more technology in to really help level the business up? And then the people pillar as well. What's happening with your leadership team? What is your apprenticeship training programs, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at all of that and getting ready to either invite private equity in or private equity's already in and they're like, oh, we need help improving those three pillars.
Gotcha. Wow. So I got to ask right off the top, that is such a hot accent. Where's that from?
Australia. I am
Okay.
Australia. I'm from down under.
Oh my gosh. And what are you doing in the US then for crying out loud? It had to be a boy. Let me just throw it out there. It had to be a boy because it usually is. But I'm just curious, what made you move from Australia to the US?
It was love, but I fell in love with the country. I came here in 2023 and I can't really explain it. I got off the plane, I saw the big American flag in the airport, and I just felt like this sense of peace. And then I was at home, and then started to spend time here, meeting a lot of Americans. Love the mindset, love the attitude. In Australia, we've got something called tall poppy syndrome. So if you have a dream or you're ambitious in Australia, they're like, who are you to think this or want to do that? And they like cut you down really quickly.
Wow.
Where in America, I love the energy. You say you've got a dream or you're ambitious or you want to invent something or do something or anything. And even the waiters at a restaurant's like, that's amazing. How can I help? I'll follow you on Instagram. I know someone that might be interested. And just this
Nice.
energy that you have here, I just fell in love.
Awesome. Well, you welcome. You're always
Thank you.
welcome. And you picked the great state of Florida to start in. So, once you get up north, like yesterday, we got 10 inches of snow and it's about 10 degrees out. So it's a little bit chilly. So if you start traveling or continue to travel, just be careful in the winter up north here. So, but that's
Yes.
awesome. Super cool. So you mentioned three words: people, process, and profit. And I have to guess that the vast majority, at least the vast majority of the people that I come in contact with, the entrepreneurs that we work with, they're pretty dialed into their process and they're pretty dialed into their profit, but they don't seem to be very dialed into the people side. Is that what you're seeing in your world as well?
Very much so, and particularly for entrepreneurs. And I've done this myself as a founder of Empowered Women in Trades back in Australia, is when you're in that founder creative stage, exactly, you're nailing the process, you're building whether it's the service or the product, you're tweaking, you're living and breathing that, and you're aiming for well, first milestone, this baby needs to stand on its own 2 feet and make enough
Sure.
money to feed itself and feed me. And then
Yeah.
we need investment and everything like that. So those are the two things that founders generally will focus on with laser focus. And at the beginning, especially with the energy of a startup or creating something new, you naturally attract a lot of people that will just follow, but then they
Sure.
eventually get burnt out.
Okay.
And there's a point where any business starts to need to actually put in a strategy behind their people, behind their culture, slow down to speed up, take time to
Yeah.
listen to your people. And sometimes founders, and I've been guilty of this, you've got founder love and founder blindness, and you don't take the time to listen to your people who are seeing it from a complete different point of view to you. And sometimes it's really painful to let go of some of the stuff you got to let go of to allow the
Yeah.
business to go to the next level and nurture the people that are in the business.
Wow, that's great. It's crazy to me. My travels, I see a lot of people that they hire a rock star and they make this huge assumption that you're going to be a rock star you were a rock star, so you're going to be a rock star at my company. So I don't really have to invest in you. I don't really have to spend much time with you. Do you run into that? Because that just seems to
Yeah.
be that seems to be a big blind spot where I'm just going to sit back and let my team do whatever my team does. That just seems
Hmm.
to it seems to be a kiss of death, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I put it in a sporting term, and I'm going to do my best to put it in an American supporting term. Look at
Here
Tom
we go.
Brady. If we
Oh
look at Tom
boy.
Brady,
Sure,
do you think he just played on that field by himself, never touching base with his coach, never working with a physio? He just rocked up, played, and left? Absolutely
yeah,
not. He was part
yeah,
of an ecosystem. Yes, he's a star and a star that we've even heard of in Australia.
sure.
But he's a star because he was inside an ecosystem that was nurturing his talents and his strengths. But he still was listening to his coaches. He was still listening to, his medical team and his physios and all of that kind of stuff. He was being nurtured to become the superstar that he is.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tom, I know you're listening. And, if Hacia said anything wrong, let us know because we want to be 100% accurate on this.
100%.
So, but I love that analogy because, again, whether it's a player, whatever you call your upper level players, I think you do your company a disservice by just letting them go. And again, maybe they want it that way, but that might be their blind spot. And I think
Yeah.
every team, every individual on that team needs some type of, connection, needs something from leadership. So I love that piece. And I think the more we invest in our people, I love the book. If I don't know if you've ever read it, but the book's called People Over Profit. It's a
Yes.
great book thinking it's just so opposite for people. People think profit over people, and it's actually inverted. And so that's kind of what I want to invest some of our time with today. Before we do jump into that, though, I want to know and the listeners want to know, were you always in the entrepreneurial space and now I got to change it to corporate Australia. So were you in corporate Australia? Did you work for a company or did you always own your own company?
So I've grown up in a fifth generation plumbing family. So our family
Oh,
business has been around for a very, very long time, but still very entrepreneurial. Like my father pivoted the business to focusing just on manufacturing, installing, and servicing medical infection control equipment.
okay.
Before that, we were doing mechanical services and commercial kitchens and everything as well. So as much as it's an old company over 135 years, each generation, and why it's lasted 5 generations, each generation has brought that entrepreneurial mindset into it. And then
Okay.
when I was 18, I set my first business up called Bamboozled Office, which was like a bookkeeping, back office business
Oh,
for the
sure.
fashion industry because I was a model
Okay.
at the time. So I could see so many creative people in that industry that were amazing at what they did, but they were getting in trouble with the tax department. They had bad cash flow, and my business acumen that I already had from a young age being involved in the family business. I'm like, I can help these people streamline things and do everything like that. So I started my first business when I was 18.
Nice. Well, congrats. Well, and the reason that I ask, Casey, is there's a lot of people listening right now that really envy the position that you and I are in, where we own our own business. And some people think, mistakenly that you start a business and you can lay out on the beach for 7 hours a day with your laptop and, just click a couple buttons and money just falls into your account. There are those people that have that thought. But then there's a lot of people, I'm guessing, and from some of the research that I've done and some of the people that have talked to me from our audiences, they're just afraid to make that step because they like that safety of corporate America or
Mhm.
whatever country they're in. They like that net that there's, money coming in every 2 weeks and blah, blah, blah. Was that something for you? I mean, did you at 18 and on, you just always were owning your own business? Was that pretty much your path?
I've worked in some corporations as well, and that's been
Okay.
really great to work in some big companies and understand, I guess, the nuances. And
Sure.
I've been a CEO of a plumbing company as well, and that was a great experience. But I've always had something on the side, and I think for people that's a good balance. Like if you're scared to make that step, start
Yeah.
something a little bit on the side. You've got your guaranteed income or work out what I call your burn rate is. Go, okay, I know it's going to take me maybe 3 months to get a new job. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to resign from this job. I've got enough money in the bank account to survive for, say, 9 months. So 6 months, I'm going to go hard on my business. If in 6 months' time it doesn't look like it's going to be successful, I've got another 3 months to find myself a job and get back into corporate
Sure.
America. So you can
Yeah.
kind of like leave, but have that safety strategy behind you.
Sure. Well, that's a really great idea. And we tell people every week that this comes up, there's no right or wrong way to do it. So the way that Hacia did it or the way that I did it, there's no right or wrong way. So it's find your way. But I just feel bad for people that kind of have they've kind of transitioned to hopelessness where they feel like they're always going to be at 50 weeks a year and then, they live for these 2 weeks off. And then when they, get these 2 weeks off, they're standing in line at Disney World or they're unhappy or there's, just like I just feel
Yeah.
bad for those people. So our goal is just to let people know of other stories and how that works. I love that where
Yeah.
you have a day job and a night job, so to speak.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem to do that. So,
Or
so
buying a business. Like all my businesses,
there you
I've
go.
started from scratch. So I had to have that runway of like,
Same with
okay,
me.
until
Yep.
this is revenue positive, how do I survive? But
Yeah.
if you're buying into an already revenue positive business, you don't
Yeah.
have to do that. So that's another great way to leave corporate America and get into is buying,
Yeah.
and you can buy into a business. You don't have to buy all of it. There's so many different ways to get into it. So just be courageous. Again, there's no right way. Be courageous, be innovative. Again, negotiate for equity. If you don't have the cash, it can be on sweat of like, okay,
Sure.
well, you're going to pay me a $250,000 salary to be an executive of this company. I only
Yep.
need 100 grand to survive. So I will buy my equity by sacrificing 150 of my
Sure.
salary over the next 5 years, and I want 20% of the company.
Sure. Wow, that's a great. Yeah. There are a lot of ideas, and I think that's what's really helpful. Do you kind of help people? I'm just curious at All Star, do you help people like that, that maybe there's somebody listening right now that isn't happy with where they are, but they don't understand all the options? Is that kind of where All Star would jump
Yes.
in and help?
Definitely, definitely in helping and understanding. And sometimes even it's looking at the company that you're in, going through what I just said and helping our
Yeah.
clients go, hey, well, you've come to us, but let's maybe structure this conversation with the company that you're with. Is there a way that you can buy into it and all of a sudden become, a part owner in that business? You don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to leave the business that you're working for
Yeah.
to not become an owner of a business. And especially if you're with a mum and dad company, they might not have children and a succession plan. They're looking for a succession plan, and you can put your hand up and say, hey, I'm happy to talk about what that succession plan looks like over the next 5 years, 10 years, etc. So there's so many opportunities potentially even in the company you're working for right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's where, again, we talk about blind spots. That's a huge one for me because I've only started businesses from scratch. So that's all I know. It was never really on my radar to buy something from somebody else. It wasn't right or wrong, good or bad. It just never was really on my radar. So thank you for opening that up for me as well as for people listening. So again, at the end, we'll give Hacia's information, but I want to make sure that if you're listening and you're in that spot where you're stuck, we don't want you to be stuck there because I know how yucky that is. And it's just,
Hmm.
oh, it's so stressful. You go home and beat the dog and you're not happy and, your kids aren't, you're not spending time with them. If you're burning 50, 60, 70 hours a week and you're not working for yourself, it just feels so, depleting where you're just losing your energy and what fills you back up. So again, All Star Consulting would love to help you with that. And I want to transition over into your book because I'm
Hmm.
super excited for you. Congratulations on, writing this book. It's called The $1 Billion Blind Spot. And everybody listening all over the planet right now is like, what in the world is the $1 billion blind spot? So fill us in on what that is so we can unpack that today.
So we've really touched base on it, and it's coming back to the people and the culture. So if we're looking at the hard dollars of your P&L and your balance sheets or your margins and productivity rates, when your team is psychologically distressed or unhappy or touching base on all of the things that we just mentioned, you actually see that in your numbers. So you'll see that in your turnover rate. And a report actually came out last year from Gallup that it's cost the US economy $1 trillion in voluntary turnover, and 52% of the people said that the company could have done something about it. So
Mm,
that's a huge amount of money. So every time you get a resignation letter, that's costing you up to 200% of what that employee got
sure.
paid. So whatever their salary is, that resignation letter just cost you 200% off their salary. So it's very expensive to be losing people, but it's also very expensive to have people there that are feeling psychologically distressed. So they're making mistakes, they're trying to cover up their mistakes, they're blaming each other and not working together as a team, and all
Yeah.
of those kind of things. So basically, yeah, it's how much is your workplace culture costing you? And whereas
Yeah.
all of these bleeds that are happening that are affecting your bottom line due to a lack of psychological safety, how much are you losing and not being able to have innovative thinking as well? Because if people feel like if they speak up and they're going to get punished or judged or silenced, they're not going to put a quirky idea on the table. But that might be $1 billion idea, that quirky idea. So you
Sure.
really want to have cultures where people have the psychological safety to speak up, both for all of the research shows that the number one predictor of high performing teams is psychological safety. And it's having teams. When I was the CEO for the plumbing company, I set up what was called a code of conduct for my executive team. What
Okay.
behaviors do we not want to have in the team? What behaviors do we want to have in the team? And do we feel that there's enough psychological safety to call each other out on the behaviors that we don't want to see? And the answer was
Sure.
no. So we had to do a lot of work on going, well, let's make sure we give each other permission to hold each other to that high standard. And in this meeting, we agree if we display some of the behaviors that the team deems is not productive for the overall performance of the team, we call each
Sure.
other out.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, there's probably somebody listening right now that is older school and they're thinking like, culture, we don't
Hmm.
have one. They're thinking this psychological safety thing, I don't even understand what that means. How do you like address not these big corporations that have thousands of employees, but even like your dad's plumbing business where, there's a group of people that they just want to do their job. They show up, they want to do their job, and go home. But yet now all of a sudden we're talking about psychological safety, we're talking about people and culture. I mean, then we start thinking about, oh, well, next you're going to want me to sit around a fire and play
Yeah,
guitar,
no.
and do kumbaya. So, I mean, that's like a pretty big blind spot that we
Hmm.
notice. And I'm guessing as part of your book, how do you kind of help that person with that blind spot? Because I can't even identify with $1 trillion. I don't know what that looks like. and there's a lot of people that don't even agree with the cost of turnover, and that's a whole
Yep.
different show, right? But what are your words of encouragement or advice for a business owner that does have high turnover, but they're not making the connection that they have anything to do with it? How do you kind of start with that person?
So I first of all ask them the question, when you have meetings, are you doing more of the talking or less of the talking?
Okay.
And as a leader, that's a big sign because as leaders, we should be listening a lot more than we're talking, because that will tell us so much about what's happening in our businesses. So,
So
especially the industries that I'm working in, they're like, well, I go in, I tell them what we're doing, I give them an update, they all nod at me, and I walk out. And I'm like, you got massive problems.
yeah, right.
And they're like, what do you mean? They're all agreeing with me. And I'm like, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And is the work getting done? Well, no, I've got to follow up 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, so that's a waste of your time. And clearly
sure.
there's something going wrong because you're not employing children. So
Right.
you're not employing, a 12-year-old and trying to get it to do their homework. So
Right. Yeah.
you've got grown adults, and if you're chasing grown adults 3 or 4 times to do something, that's a problem, isn't it? And it's like, oh, yeah, it's very frustrating. And by the fourth time, I'm just yelling at them. And I'm like, and how do you think that's making them feel? And they're
Right.
like, well, they deserve
How's
to
that
be
working
yelled
for you?
at. Yeah, I said, okay, well, flip that on. How does it make you feel having to come to work and yell at people to get stuff
Right.
done? It's
Sure.
frustrating, isn't it? And how you're feeling is how the other people's feeling. So you're both feeling yuck
Yeah.
when that's that state is not a productive state. No one's doing their best work. You, as the leader's not doing your best work when you're yelling at someone. You're doing your best
Sure.
work when you're in your zone of genius. So
Wow.
let's not emotionally coddle. This is not about emotionally coddling. It's about creating brave spaces for people to potentially push back on the leader
Okay.
and say,
Yeah.
hey, that's I don't think that's the best way to do that. Or
Sure.
if you want us to do that at that time, at that quality, we're going to need some software, or we're going to need a
Right.
consultant, or we just do not have the capacity to deliver on your expectations. So get the owners or the leaders' expectations and the reality of the team aligning? And that comes from, again, listening to your team, going, this is my expectation. Is it realistic? No. Okay, how do we deliver on my expectation and make it realistic? But that will only come when you're hearing your team talking to you. So, where I boil it down to is that, going back to that question, when you go into meetings, are you doing the majority of the talking? And is there a lot of silence from everyone else in the room?
Sure.
If yes, you got a big problem.
Wow. Well, that's a great litmus test, and it doesn't really require much other than your awareness at your next meeting, just to ask yourself that question as you're walking in. But I love that safety part, because I think when teams don't feel safe, when human beings don't feel safe, then they end up really not contributing. I speak a lot around the country like you do, and I ask people, if they ask a question in a setting like that, if I would answer by saying, "Oh my gosh, that is the stupidest question that I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe that you even said that." If I would say that to somebody asking a question, it's safe to say that there isn't a person in that room that would raise their hand for the rest of that session, yet
Yeah.
alone probably the rest of that day, right?
Yeah.
So we as leaders, we kind of do that to people. And I think that's a huge blind spot that hey, if you don't want to work here, don't work here. It's like, wow, when I hear that, it makes me feel so bad for these people that are in that
Mm-hmm.
spot, right? And I'm just curious, because psychological safety sounds like this big, massive, I got to take a college course just on that, right? How do you boil psychological safety down to like something that a sixth grader could understand? How do you do that?
So if I'm talking to a leader, it will be, are you comfortable being challenged? How does it
Okay,
make you feel when someone challenges you
great.
on in a respectful way, of course. If
Yeah.
it's a
Yep.
respectful challenge or a respectful pushback on your thoughts, how comfortable are you in receiving critical feedback around your leadership style?
Sure.
So if all of this is making a leader feel uncomfortable, then you know that they're not really creating psychological safety for themselves first, because a leader's got to have
Yeah.
the strength to be able to take that discomfort and not project their discomfort onto the person who's doing it. So again, if
Sure.
someone said, look, I feel the way that you handled that meeting has really resulted in me not really trusting you. As a leader, you got to be able to take that punch and not be like, well, you want to talk about trust? You're
Right.
constantly late and you're on your, I see you on your social media at
Oh
lunchtime
man.
and you do, and you do, and you do, and you do. Whoa, 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 whoa. There is absolutely no psychological safety there
Right.
at all
Yeah. Wow, that's
because you're being
fantastic.
defensive.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that that's probably a big challenge for a lot of leaders is to encourage your team to challenge you. I love
Hmm.
the fact because I was going to make sure that we did talk about that respect piece because, again, same scenario. If I sit in a meeting and disrespect everybody, you know what? It's probably not a really smart place to do it. It's not, nothing comes of that of value. And I think that, again, good, strong leaders encourage challenges from their team, and it's interesting, like when you watch football, there's times that a player and a coach like get into it, right? Where they're
Hmm.
passionate and they have differences of opinion. And for whatever reason, there's always a camera on them. And then they blow this out of proportion, like this is some big, thing that should never happen. But yet in corporate America, it should happen every day. I have no problem having people challenge me because I
Hmm.
might have a blind spot. I might be wrong. How else are you going to learn? I mean,
Yeah.
do you run into a lot of people that don't encourage challenging from the team?
Very much so, because they think that will slow the process down, but it actually improves the process because a person having perspective A and a person having perspective B coming together, you'll often get C. So you'll often get a mixture of the two perspectives, which
Gotcha. Okay.
sometimes creates something that's even better, quicker, faster, stronger, more
Sure.
appropriate for your clients. Especially if you're a leader, you are the furthest person often removed from your clientele.
Yeah.
So if someone that is boots on ground, that's engaging with the clients, that speaks to the clients regularly, that's seeing what's happening out there in the product or on the factory floor or etc., and they're pushing back on you, they're often pushing back from a place that you don't go to anymore because you're so high up in leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then saying you might push back because you've got the pressure off your board or your investors and you're seeing it from a different view. So when I'm doing my coaching, I'll always bring in that piece of paper that you can see the old woman or the young woman in the image.
Oh,
And I'll
sure.
get
Yep.
the team, yeah, I'll get the team to say, do we agree this is a white piece of paper with black ink on it? Yes. So there's a common ground. Everyone
Sure.
agrees in what's tangibly in my hand. Now,
Right.
who sees an old woman, who sees a young woman, who sees both? There's three
Right.
different ways, or who sees nothing. There's four
Yeah.
different ways to see
Sure.
that reality. And then that really opens their eyes to like, no one's wrong with different perspectives, or if someone's pushing back on you or challenging an idea, it doesn't mean anyone's right or wrong. It's
Yeah.
like they're just seeing it from a different perspective. And as a leader, that's a privilege. If you've created an environment where your team is coming and bringing a different perspective to you, they trust you and they feel comfortable, that's absolutely amazing. And you're going to really, sometimes you've got to slow down to speed up. Understanding that perspective, seeing it from a different way, you're like, wow, we could actually do this process in 3 steps instead of 5 steps. We did in 5 steps all the time because that's just how we've
Sure.
always done it. But they're
Yeah.
right. If we take out step 2 and step 3 and automate that, we can get the product to the client or the service to the client way quicker.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. We're going to take a quick break. I know we're way past half, but hey, this is great information, but we got to pay the bills. So we're going to take a quick break and I'm going to unpack a word that you used that I love that we're going to talk about when we come back. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Hacia Atherton, the principal consultant at All Star Consulting Services. And we've been focusing on the team, but I kind of want to transition to the customer because I think this is where some people really lose sight of culture and, the people part of that. because when I wrote my Amazon #1 best-selling book called Growing on Purpose, we talked about strengthening the team, and we also talked about improving the customer experience, and how those two really are so intertwined with each other. And I feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity for
Hmm.
people. They might not, they might think team, I don't care about them, but I sure care about my customer, right? So I kind of want to address that, hey, Sia, as we talk this through on the second half here. When you think about that, what is that? I mean, my research showed that a bad team or an unhappy team, a non-productive team, whatever, cannot really provide a good customer experience. We've all been to Taco Bell or McDonald's or any fast food place where there's a $14 an hour kid who you can tell doesn't want to be there. They're not smiling. They don't say hi. They just stand there, can I take your order? And they have no real interest in what they're doing. That experience is really like, I'm a customer.
Yeah.
And it just really is like, you can at least fake it for a minute, say hi, have some eye contact, whatever, right? When you talked about that customer, is your research shown, has your experience been that a bad team really cannot provide a good experience for that customer as well?
100%. And I'll put this as a story in the context of a trade-based business with clients calling in to book a plumber to come and do everything like that.
Sure.
And the team that I was working with was so disjointed, didn't work together. They literally stared at a phone ringing because it wasn't their phone. So the phone was ringing, the service coordinator was engaged in
Yeah.
somewhere else, her phone was ringing, and
Yeah.
everyone else in that call center just stared at the phone and go, it's not my phone, it's not my job. So you just lost a potential
Yep.
client because they're going to go to
Yep.
the next plumber on Google and call that. They need
Absolutely.
a plumber. They don't care
Yep.
if you're answering your phone or not. So
Right.
that's an amazing example of like the team just going, it's not my phone. I'm not going to answer
Wow. And I mean, that happens like every day. How many times has that happens? And we as leaders tend to miss that a lot.
it.
And we
Hmm.
think, good, hey, I got this. And it's just crazy to think that a customer is not treated as well as they should be. And then we kind of miss that it's the team that's really, not performing well. And they're looking at that phone and you know what? Let it ring.
Yeah.
And like you talked about Gallup before, and the sad thing is in the US, only 1 in 3 of your team are actively engaged in their job.
Hmm.
So that means 2 out of 3 people, they really don't care.
They're staring at the phone. Two out of
They're
three are
looking at
staring
it
at the
going,
phone. They're going, it's
sucks
not
to
my
be
phone.
you, it's
Yeah.
like, hey,
Looks like you've missed a call. Yeah.
yeah. Oh man, if you were sitting there, you'd have got it, but hey, you're not there, so I can't. What do you want me to do,
Yeah.
it's just so sad that that's the state of our, now construction is probably pretty similar and typical to other industries. You and I
Hmm.
are both in them and have been in them for a while. But I just think that the psychological safety that we talked about before then turns into, if you can't see the money that you're losing by a dysfunctional team, you can see what happens when that dysfunctional team now treats the customer with less than respect. And that to me is where the real money happens. So if you don't think that you're losing money on the psychological team, I guarantee you're going to see that you're losing it when the customer, why are you losing customers? I mean,
Hmm.
2 out of 3 customers, they just leave they're silent about it, right? They don't say anything. They don't bang a drum. They don't call the owner and say, hey, I want to keep buying from you, but your team sucks. No, they just go somewhere else. And then we look at this list of migrated customers and we try to press blame on
Hmm.
somebody other than ourselves. And that's a huge blind spot. And I'm curious if what can we do about that? Because I just feel really like that's such an important thing to deal with. And as we start to land our plane today, I'm just curious, what can we do as business owners to really improve that experience for the customer?
With every executive I work with, tell them you've got to change your mindset. you have two customers, your external and your internal
Yep.
customers. Your internal customers is your number one priority. So, are you engaging with your team the way that you want your team to engage with the client? Is your
Yep.
team engaging with each other how you would like them to engage with the client? And if you're nurturing and you look at your whole employees as if they're customers of your service because they are they
Right.
buying into the values of your company? Are they actually excited about what you're doing? Do they believe in the importance of the product or service that you're delivering? Because if they don't, then how are they going to convince your customer that you're the best plumber or this is the best,
Sure.
coffee machine or whatever
Yep.
it is that you're doing as well? So it's bringing that mindset to treat your internal customers, which is your employees, the way that
Right.
you want your external customers looked after. So that's the same with handling complaints. If an external customer complains about something, how do you handle that? You handle it quickly, you understand what happened, you go back, you try and fix the problem. If you have an internal complaint about something, you don't just go, oh, well, you need to get more, drink a cup of concrete and harden up, or that's really not my problem. I'm not HR. No,
Right.
address it the same way you want your external. Because if you do that to your internal client, as soon as an external client complains, they're going to
Yep.
mimic the same internal process you did. They're going to go, well, my complaint was handled quickly. There was a solution, there's a resolution. I feel obligated to do the same now for our client that's just done a complaint.
Wow. And I think this is why you and I, Hacia, will always have a job that AI can't fix because there's this external viewpoint that so many companies need because they have this blind spot. They think, number one, my team is okay. They think, number two, my customer experience is okay. And the reality is if they would have somebody come from the outside like you or me and look at this, it's crazy what we see. And people, I don't know if you ever run into it, but I have people that like don't believe me. Like
Mhm.
I'm making this up and I'm like, this is what happened. I like secret shop some customers and they're like, they would refuse to believe that that was the experience I had.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my gosh. And I'm just curious if you get that. Do you get that where it's like, I don't have problems with my team and I don't have problems with my customer experience. Everything is honky dory. I don't even know why I'm talking to you, Hey, Sia. Do you get that a lot where people are just that stuck in thinking everything is okay?
Very much so. And that comes back to what I was saying before around silence, because they're not hearing problems. They
Yeah.
just think there is no problems. But that's when you've got the worst problems because no one feels courageous enough to talk about the
Yeah.
challenges. And unless you're
Wow.
diving into the numbers and going, well, what's our client retention rate? What's our client burn rate? What's our average spend per client? All of those kind of things, unless you're like an absolute data monkey in there living and breathing and you're kind of like a business analysis, which a lot
Yeah.
of founders and CEOs aren't, you're not seeing what your numbers are telling you. And I always say, make sure you're going and at least every 6 months getting like a business analysis, real data driven person to go, what is the story all of your numbers are telling you? And look
Yeah.
in the dark, dark corners of your numbers because that will tell you so much about what's happening in your company. And then you go, oh, this silence that I'm hearing is actually not that great. So
Yeah.
yeah, often when I hear people, they're like, "Well, I've got no problems. No one's complaining to me. We've got no HR reports.
Yeah.
We're in a high turnover industry." That's what I get all the time.
Oh, isn't that
We're in a
great?
high turnover
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I tell you what, and or you get those people will call a leader will call that person that will call other people out or call you out. They're high something, right?
Yeah,
They're high. I'm trying to think of the word. What is it when they're high? A lot of hand holding has to be done.
high
You know,
maintenance.
high maintenance. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you're awesome. High maintenance. We start to like justify are and rationalize everything. Well, they're just high maintenance.
Yeah.
If you weren't so high maintenance, you wouldn't have such a problem. And it's just like, oh my gosh, they're not high maintenance. They actually are trying to encourage you and help
Hmm.
you. And so it's just crazy how you see that. So if you're listening and you're labeled high maintenance, it's possible that you might be, a high encourager. You might be somebody that's really wanting to challenge and better that,
Mhm.
team. And so now you got to decide, how far do I push this? Because there are plenty of leaders that they're not listening here because they don't need us. They got everything under control. But those people, they don't need any help from you. They got it all under control, everything in their mind. And that's just the saddest spot, is, being stuck in that job. So,
But I will
um,
interrupt you there and give
yeah,
a
go ahead.
really great technique. If you
Yeah,
feel you're that high maintenance person or you're a
yeah,
leader that feels they have a high maintenance person, this structure is amazing. So every time you go to talk to your boss, if you're that person or you're the boss receiving this information, put it
yeah.
in this structure. What is the one problem? The one problem or challenge that you're talking about? What are the three potential solutions you see? And what is your recommendation? Use that
Wow.
structure
Yeah,
because you're not just complaining, you're going,
yeah.
here's an issue, here's the three potential ways we can solve it, and here is my recommendation. And so
Wow.
from a leader's point of view, you're like, wow, this person's really thought this out. They're not complaining. They've
Yeah.
thought of three different ways. They've analyzed it. They're giving me a solution. Yeah, I agree. It's an easy thing to say, yes, go implement it. And if
Wow.
you're the person that's going up to a leader, you're not presenting a whinge. You're identified a problem. You showed that you've got the foresight to challenge the solution in three potential ways. And then you've got a recommendation as well. So it's a really
Wow.
good structure to take
Yeah.
away that whinging, high maintenance thing and give an actual playbook of like, here's the problem, here's potential solutions, this is what I recommend. Can I go execute it?
Yeah, that's brilliant. You just saved everybody $15 from buying John Gordon's book, The No Complaining Rule, because John said you can complain about anything you want in business to anybody you want, as long as you have a solution in mind,
Yes.
which I absolutely love that, because let's face it, there are high maintenance people, there are complainers, and they sit there and pick everything apart, and they have no solution. They have no interest in finding a solution. They just love picking at those problems. So, Hacia gave you a great solution about that. Is, if you have the problem, come up with three alternatives and then pick one that you think is going to work the best. I
Yeah,
mean, and if you still experience resistance, you know what, might not be the right place for you. And that's, again, up
exactly.
to you to
And
decide.
and that's from the employee and the leader. And I've always enforced that with my teams. They can come and tell me any complaint they want as long as they
Love it.
bring it in that
Yep.
formula. Otherwise,
That's
I'm not going to listen to it.
That's brilliant. And that's psychological safety. It means I can come to
Yes.
you and share my problem, but here's what I'm thinking of the solutions. And then I think this is the best one. And if it doesn't work, hopefully you can at least, figure out what your next step is. But nothing worse than leaving frustrated and disrespected on either level, whether you're the
Hmm.
leader or you're the person on the team. So I could sit here all day and talk about this. Number one, your accent's awesome, so I just love listening to it. And number two, I love talking about blind spots. I have one more question for you, and I'm going to let you go. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening, Hey, Sia? Maybe it's something we covered, maybe it's something that we haven't yet, but what would your tip of the day be today?
Would be learn how to be incredibly grateful for your discomfort. So every time you feel discomfort or you feel that kind of just something is not sitting right, be really, really grateful because that is your opportunity to grow, to learn something about you, to reflect about like, why am I feeling uncomfortable right now? What do I need to do to get out of this discomfort? And be really grateful that that is a growth opportunity because if we're not growing, we're dying. So we
Wow.
need to have those moments of discomfort to keep expanding ourselves as human beings. So learn to find gratitude for your discomfort.
Wow, that's great. Growth really doesn't happen outside of your comfort zone. So you
Mm-mm.
got to get out of that occasionally. If you're listening now and you can't remember the last time you were out of your comfort zone, Well, that's going to be something that you're going to have to wrestle with, and hopefully you can find some way to get out of your comfort zone because you probably haven't been growing. So, we'll get off that horse today, but I want to just ask you one last thing. If people do want to get a hold of you, let's just say that somebody's listening right now, hey, Sia, and they are really connecting with you. They're connecting with the topic. They're connecting. They're agreeing with what you're saying. They're seeing themselves in that tough spot. What's the best way for people to connect with you personally?
A great way is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So Hacia, Hacia, Atherton on LinkedIn is a great way to connect. And then my email is hacia at allstarconsultinginc.com. So either way of them, if you're not on LinkedIn, send me an email. If you're in LinkedIn, connect with me, but please put a little note in why you're connecting with me. Just don't just
Yeah. Don't
connect.
just say hey, because that usually
Just be
doesn't
like,
work.
hey, because I'm like, who is you? So just put a little, if you do connect, reach out
Yeah.
with just a little note of why you're connecting. I'm always
No,
happy to connect with anyone, but you do get like all of these spammy requests
yes,
sometimes.
no, absolutely. Put the positive polarity podcast in as a
hmm
subject just so she knows it's legit or whatever. But generally, yeah, I'm right there with you. I get these crazy things every single day. They want to make me millions of dollars without doing any work. So just be sensitive to that. If you're listening, if you want to connect with Hacia, she gave you that information. Dana will put it down in our show notes at the bottom. Thank you so much, Hacia, for hanging out with us. I'm so excited to unpack this topic. I love the fact that we found $1 billion blind spot today, and it might not cost your individual company $1 billion, but it's safe to say that it's cost you some money. And our goal is for you to look a year from now and go, oh my gosh, I saved that money because I bought the book or I'm listening to the Thrive podcast. Whatever you're doing, please don't just jump into your next podcast, but just kind of sit with what she said because there's some real power here and there's really some great things. And let's just say this to end, your team appreciates that. Your team will thank you for it. And they are wanting, most of them are wanting to do a good job. They're struggling with how. And it's not really just up to them to figure that out. If you're the leader, you have a big responsibility in that. Maybe just buy the book, jump on her podcast, email her. She'll be happy to help. And again, hey, Sia, thank you so much for this. This has been great, and I can't wait to see where this takes you. And you have any plans of heading back to Australia, or is US now going to be your new spot?
So US is definitely home, but I go back to Australia twice a year. I've still got my Empowered Women in Trades business over there. So in October, we always have our big annual gala.
Okay.
And then I've still got family. My dad's 82, so I
Oh my
definitely want to
gosh.
go back twice a year to spend time with him because he's probably doesn't have 100 years left on this
Yeah.
planet. So
Is he still working, or did he
oh, he
hang up
still
the
works. He
pennant?
still comes
Oh
into the
gosh.
factory a couple of times a week, and he balances a nice lifestyle of golf and working.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you're listening, Hacia's dad. Thank you so much for raising such a great daughter. Thank you for letting her come to the US and help us because we desperately need help here with this $1 billion blind spot. So thank you, Hacia, again. And I can't wait to keep learning from you and all that you're doing.
Amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience.